Hello, my name is Sophia, and today I'm going to share the most painful and transformative story of my life. A story about family betrayal, justice, and a forgotten document that changed everything. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, or know someone facing family injustice, stay until the end. What happened to me could save you from making an irreversible mistake. The invisible daughter, 1 to 4 o'clock. I grew up as the middle child in what seemed like a perfect family. My father owned a chain of construction material stores. My mother was a retired teacher, the heart of our home. There were 3 of us: Ricardo, the oldest and Dad's favorite, Isabella, the youngest and everyone's protected princess, and me, Sophia, the responsible one nobody noticed. From childhood, I saw the difference. Ricardo went to business meetings, learned about the company, received constant praise. Isabella got all the attention, always needing special care. And me, I was just expected to handle everything quietly. No complaints, no recognition, no questions asked. When my father fell seriously ill 5 years ago, guess who dropped everything to care for him? Not Ricardo, too busy running the company. Not Isabella, too fragile for hospitals. It was me. I slept in uncomfortable chairs, coordinated doctors, managed medications, held his hand through every painful treatment. My career stopped advancing. My relationships fell apart. My savings vanished paying for things insurance wouldn't cover. But I told myself it would be worth it. I believed my sacrifice would be recognized, not with money, but with love and respect. My mother had died 2 years before my father, and even drowning in grief, I kept being everyone's rock. I thought family meant something. I was devastatingly wrong. The will, 4 to 8 o'clock. 3 months after my father's funeral, we were called to the family lawyer's office for the reading of the will. I remember that morning clearly. My stomach was in knots, though I didn't understand why. Some instinct was screaming that something was wrong. Ricardo arrived in an expensive tailored suit, confident and composed. Isabella came with her husband, dabbing her eyes with tissues. I came alone, as always, wearing a simple black dress, my hands trembling slightly. The lawyer opened the sealed envelope with formal precision and began reading in a monotone voice. With each sentence, my world collapsed piece by piece. 50% of all assets, including the businesses, real estate holdings, and investment portfolios, went to Ricardo to continue the family legacy and expand the company. 40% went to Isabella to ensure her security and comfort for life, acknowledging her sensitive nature and need for stability. Then came my name. 10%. Just 10% for Sophia, who had always been independent and capable of taking care of herself. 10%. I did the math in my head while my vision blurred. 5 years of my life caring for him day and night. 5 years watching my dreams die. 5 years sacrificing everything. And I got 10% of what my siblings received. But the humiliation wasn't finished. The lawyer continued reading, and the words felt like knives. My 10% wouldn't even be accessible to me. It would be placed in a trust fund, locked away until I reached 60 years old. The only exception would be extreme financial emergency, and even then, I would need approval from a family committee. That committee, Ricardo and Isabella. I would have to beg my siblings for permission to access my own inheritance. The message couldn't have been clearer if he'd written it in blood. You don't matter, you never mattered, and I'm making sure you remember that even after I'm gone. Tears streamed down my face. I looked at Ricardo, desperate for some acknowledgement, some explanation. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I turned to Isabella, hoping for sisterly compassion. She whispered a hollow, "I'm sorry, Sophia." That meant absolutely nothing. I walked out of that office completely shattered, not by the money itself, but by what it represented. I had been erased from my own family. The spiral, 8 to 11 o'clock. The weeks after the will reading were the darkest period of my life. I fell into a depression, so deep I couldn't see daylight. Sleep became impossible. Food tasted like nothing. I couldn't work, couldn't function, couldn't understand how the father I loved could be so cruel. I tried reaching out to Ricardo, hoping for answers, or maybe just acknowledgement of how unfair this was. He was cold and dismissive. Dad knew what he was doing, he said. The company needed strong leadership. I should accept reality and move on with my life. When I mentioned the years I spent caring for our father, he actually laughed. That was your choice, Sophia. Nobody forced you. Isabella was worse in her own way. She cried with me on the phone, agreed it seemed unfair, but ultimately said she couldn't go against Dad's final wishes. It would be disrespectful to his memory. She suggested I focus on the positive, that I should be grateful for anything at all. Her words felt like another betrayal. Meanwhile, my siblings moved forward beautifully. Ricardo immediately began expanding the business, making bold investments, traveling for conferences. Isabella bought a stunning new house in the best neighborhood, redecorated completely, took a month-long trip to Europe. Their social media glowed with happiness and success. And me, I couldn't pay my rent. 3 months after the will reading, I received an eviction notice. I had nowhere to go except the old family house, which was empty and being prepared for sale. The realtor gave me 2 months before it had to be cleared out. Living in that empty house was psychological torture. Every room whispered memories of a family that never truly valued me. I wandered those halls like a ghost, invisible even to myself. I spent my days packing up decades of family belongings, preparing the house for strangers to move into. Each box felt like burying another piece of my past. One afternoon, I was clearing out my father's office, a room that had always felt sacred and off-limits during my childhood. The shelves were lined with old business books, ledgers from decades ago, framed certificates, and dusty trophies. As I reached for a stack of accounting textbooks from the 1990s, my elbow knocked the pile over. Books crashed to the floor in a cloud of dust. And there, sliding out from between 2 heavy volumes, was a yellowed envelope. My heart stopped. The envelope was old, the paper brittle and stained with age. But what made my hands shake was the handwriting on the front. My father's distinctive scrawl, shakier than in recent years but unmistakably his. The words written there made time stand still, to be opened only after my passing. Original will. Original will. Those 2 words echoed in my mind. With trembling fingers, I carefully opened the envelope, terrified it would crumble to dust. Inside was a handwritten document, several pages long, dated 23 years ago. Every page was signed by my father, and at the bottom was an official notary's seal, faded but still visible. I began reading, and tears fell onto the old paper, smudging ink that had survived more than 2 decades. The document declared, in clear and certain language, that upon his death, all of my father's assets would be divided equally among his 3 children. Equal shares, equal recognition, equal love. The will detailed every property, every bank account, every share of the business. Everything split 3 ways, fair and simple. But there was more. Tucked behind the legal document was a letter written in my father's hand 10 years after the original will. The date was October 2013. I would have been 25 years old. The letter was personal, reflective, almost like reading his private thoughts. He wrote about each of us children, Ricardo's business acumen and natural leadership, Isabella's gentle soul and need for security. And then he wrote about me. His words broke me. My Sophia has always been the strongest of my children. Independent, capable, never asking for help even when she needs it. Sometimes I worry that she doesn't know how proud I am of her. I worry that her strength makes others, including me, forget she needs love too. I keep this will as a reminder to myself that regardless of how circumstances change, regardless of who seems to need more or contribute more, my 3 children deserve equal treatment. They deserve to know they are equally loved. I hope if I ever forget this truth, someone finds this document and reminds me of what really matters. I couldn't breathe. My father hadn't wanted to exclude me. He had written this insurance policy against exactly what had happened. But something had gone wrong. During his illness, when his mind was failing, when he was vulnerable and confused, someone had influenced him to change everything. The question was who, and could I prove it? The legal battle, 15 to 2100 hours. The next morning, I called every inheritance lawyer in the city until I found one who would see me immediately. Dr. Marcello specialized in contested wills and family disputes. He was in his 50s, sharp-eyed, with a reputation for being ruthless in court. I laid both documents on his desk, the yellowed original and a copy of the recent will. He read them slowly, making notes, occasionally looking up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. After 20 minutes of silence, he sat back in his chair and said words that changed everything. "Sophia, this changes everything. This original will is legally valid. It's properly notarized and registered. More importantly, it shows your father's true intentions when he was in full mental capacity. The recent will was created while he was undergoing serious medical treatment. That opened significant grounds for contestation. I felt hope flicker for the first time in months, but also terror. If I do this," I said quietly, "my family will never forgive me. What's left of our relationship will be destroyed completely." Dr. Marcello leaned forward, his voice kind but firm. "Sophia, be honest with yourself. What relationship? Your brother won't speak to you. Your sister offers empty sympathy, but no real support. You received 10% of an inheritance you can't even access without their permission. Your family is already destroyed. The only question is whether you'll let injustice stand or fight for what's rightfully yours." He was right. I had nothing left to lose except my dignity, and that was the one thing I refused to surrender. We began building the case immediately. Dr. Marcello was thorough and relentless. We subpoenaed my father's medical records from his final 5 years. The documents painted a clear picture of cognitive decline, confusion, and vulnerability. We interviewed his doctors and nurses, many of whom remembered me as the devoted daughter who never left his side. Then we found the smoking gun. Dr. Marcello requested phone records and discovered something damning: dozens of calls between Ricardo and our father in the 2 weeks before the new will was drafted. We subpoenaed Ricardo's phone records and hit gold. WhatsApp messages, preserved in backup files, showed Ricardo explicitly pressuring our father. The messages were brutal to read. Ricardo writing, "Dad, we need to talk about the business. Sophia doesn't understand how companies work. If you split everything equally, she could vote against expansion plans. We need to protect what you built." And another, "Isabella needs more security than Sophia. Sophia has always been fine on her own. You need to make sure the will reflects reality." Our father's responses were confused, often contradictory, sometimes just question marks. The decline was visible in the text messages themselves. We filed the lawsuit, a petition to nullify the recent will based on undue influence and lack of testamentary capacity, with a request to honor the original document as my father's true wishes. The reaction was nuclear. Ricardo called me at 11 p.m. the night he was served papers, screaming so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. He called me a traitor, accused me of destroying our father's legacy for money, said I was spitting on his grave. I stayed calm and said just one thing: "I'm honoring his real legacy, Ricardo. The one he created before you manipulated him." Isabella's approach was more insidious. She tried emotional manipulation, calling in tears, begging me to think of family unity, saying Mom and Dad would be heartbroken to see us fighting. I asked her a simple question: where was family unity when I was sleeping in hospitals? Where was it when I lost everything caring for Dad? Where was it when you both got everything and I got scraps? She had no answer. The trial lasted 6 months. 6 months of depositions, expert testimonies, document analysis, and painful hearings. Medical experts testified about Dad's mental state. Handwriting analysts confirmed the original will's authenticity. Financial experts explained how the unequal distribution made no logical sense given each child's contributions. The worst part was sitting in that courtroom, seeing my siblings across the aisle, their lawyers painting me as a greedy opportunist who couldn't accept our father's wishes. They tried to argue I was financially stable and didn't need the money. They claimed the original will was outdated and irrelevant. They suggested I had somehow planted the document, though they couldn't explain how I'd forged a 23-year-old notary seal. Every hearing chipped away at what little remained of our family bonds. But I had truth on my side, and truth, it turns out, matters in court. The judge was a woman in her 60s who had clearly seen many family disputes. She listened carefully to everything, asked pointed questions, and showed no bias toward either side. When she finally delivered her verdict, her voice was clear and firm. She acknowledged that both documents were technically valid, but context mattered enormously. The original will represented my father's intentions during a time of clear mental capacity, created proactively and thoughtfully. The recent will was created during severe illness with evidence of external pressure and resulted in an inexplicable exclusion of a child who had provided the most care. Her ruling, the recent will was partially nullified due to undue influence and questionable capacity. The estate would be divided according to the original document's instructions, with equal shares for all 3 children. I had won. Justice had been served. But the cost was everything I had left. The aftermath, 2,100 hours, 25:00. Winning in court didn't feel like victory. It felt like surviving an amputation. Necessary, but permanently damaging. Ricardo cut me off completely and permanently. He blocked my number, my email, all social media. When we had to interact for business purposes regarding the company, he only communicated through lawyers. At mandatory shareholder meetings, he wouldn't look at me, wouldn't acknowledge my presence. If I spoke, he would stare at the wall until I finished. The brother I grew up with, who taught me to ride a bike, who used to protect me from bullies, was gone. In his place was a stranger filled with cold hatred. Isabella maintained a facade of civility, but only in public. At family functions, we were both obligated to attend for legal reasons. She would smile tightly and make small talk about weather and traffic. But there were no phone calls, no coffee dates, no sister bond. I had become someone she had to tolerate, not someone she loved. Her social media posts about family and sisterhood, always carefully cropped to exclude me, hurt more than Ricardo's open hostility. The extended family chose sides. Aunts and uncles who had praised me for caring for Dad suddenly went silent. Cousins unfriended me online. Family friends I'd known my whole life crossed the street to avoid me. I was labeled as the greedy daughter who sued her own family, the one who couldn't accept her father's wishes, the troublemaker who destroyed family harmony over money. What they didn't understand, what they refused to see, was that I never sued for money. I sued for recognition, for dignity, for proof that I had mattered. But here's what I learned through all that pain. I didn't lose my family in that courtroom. I lost an illusion I'd been clinging to my entire life. The family I mourned had never really existed. Real families don't exclude their caregivers. They don't punish devotion. They don't erase children who sacrifice everything. What I lost was a fantasy, a dream of unconditional love that had never been real. And what I gained, though painful, was truth. The truth set me free in ways I never expected. Rebuilding, 25:00, 28:00. With my rightful inheritance, I bought a beautiful 2-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood I'd always dreamed of living in. Modern, bright, with floor-to-ceiling windows that let in morning sunlight. Every corner of that space was mine, chosen by me, reflecting who I actually was rather than who my family expected me to be. I invested heavily in therapy, finally processing not just the inheritance battle, but decades of being overlooked and undervalued. My therapist helped me see patterns I'd been blind to my whole life. How I'd made myself small to avoid conflict. How I'd sacrificed my needs to earn love that should have been freely given. How I'd confused being useful with being valued. I returned to my career with renewed energy and clarity. Within 6 months, I was promoted to a position I'd been qualified for years earlier but had been too depleted to pursue. My colleagues noticed the change. I was more confident, more willing to advocate for myself, less willing to accept being overlooked. Most importantly, I started building a chosen family. I joined support groups for people who had experienced family estrangement and discovered I wasn't alone. Thousands of people had similar stories of being excluded, undervalued, and erased by the people who should have loved them most. We supported each other through the grief of losing families that never truly existed. I made new friends, real friends who valued me for who I was rather than what I could do for them. I started dating again, and learned what it felt like to be chosen, appreciated, celebrated. I discovered that chosen family, built on mutual respect and genuine affection, can be stronger and more reliable than blood ties. And that yellow document, that forgotten piece of paper, gave me something more valuable than money. It gave me proof that my father had loved me. In his clearest moments, before illness and manipulation clouded everything, he had wanted me to be equal. He had seen my worth. He had tried to protect me. That knowledge healed something deep inside that I thought was broken forever. Closing message, 28:00, 30:00. If you're watching this and you're facing family injustice, I want you to hear this clearly. You deserve equality. You deserve respect. You deserve to be valued for who you are, not for what you provide or how useful you are to others. Never sacrifice yourself expecting that others will recognize and reward your devotion. Do things out of genuine love if you choose, but know your worth isn't determined by how much you give or how little you complain. Documents matter more than you think. Don't throw away old papers, old envelopes, old letters. That yellow document saved my life. You never know what might be hidden in a forgotten drawer or tucked between old books. Preserve family documents, even if they seem outdated. Justice may take time, but it exists. Don't accept being erased from your own story. You have the right to fight for fairness, even when it's uncomfortable, even when others call you selfish for standing up for yourself. There's nothing selfish about demanding to be treated with basic dignity and equality. And finally, understand this. Family isn't defined by blood. Family is defined by respect, loyalty, and genuine love. It's absolutely okay to walk away from toxic relationships, even when those relationships are with parents or siblings. You're not obligated to accept mistreatment just because someone shares your DNA. Sometimes the greatest act of self-love is walking away from people who refuse to see your value. And sometimes the family you build yourself is stronger than the one you were born into. My name is Sophia. This was my story of exclusion, discovery, and justice. If it resonated with you, you're not alone. We're all fighting to be seen, to be valued, to matter. And we deserve to win those fights. Thank you for listening. End. Claude uma pod cometa arrows. Por favor, verifique as respostas.